everyone, welcome back to Threes to Wound. My name's Reese, and today we've got a really exciting tactical kill team battle report. We've got the one and only Corsairs versus an interesting new challenger, the Blooded. So two teams I haven't played before or I haven't played against. So I'll be piloting the Corsairs today, a team I've been wanting to play for a long time. So I'm really excited about getting them onto the battlefield. The Blooded too, a very interesting proposition. I'm hoping I can, finish them off very quickly, get them off the board, and we can all go have a shower early. It'll be fantastic. But in all likelihood, this should be a pretty tight contest. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump straight into the fight. Today's mission is 2.1 Escalating Hostilities from the core mission book. The mission rules are critical escalation. At the end of the second and third initiative phases, starting with the player who has initiative, each player removes one objective marker that is closest to their drop zone. The mission objective, at the end of the first and second turning point, for each objective marker friendly operatives control, you score 1 VP, to a maximum of 4 victory points per player per turning point. At the end of the third and fourth turning point, for each objective marker friendly operatives control, you score 2 VP. The Blooded won the roll-off, choosing to be the attackers, so the Corsair, as the defenders, had to choose their deployment zone. I chose the top deployment zone on your screen there, as I felt it provided a slightly better layout, but there wasn't much in it. Now it's time to show off the team I'm taking today, and today it's the Corsairs. I haven't used these guys before, so this is my first outing, so be kind, but I'm very excited about what they can bring to the table. I like the look of the models, I like the loadouts they can take, I like the options they've got, so I'm pretty excited to get them on the table. We start with the leader, or the Phalarch in this case. I've given him the mist field because that gives him, all operatives within a circle of him get a 5-up invul. So in a squishy team, that's a really, really big bonus. And I'm really wanting to, I guess, push him up the field with, a few of the other operatives as well to put the pressure on my opponent early. He's got a pretty good pistol as well, so he's pretty, good on the dual threat. The only thing that probably is the negative is I don't think my opponent has any choice but to take Seek and Destroy. So I've got a good feeling that Headhunter's going to be in the deck there. But sometimes you've got to risk it for the biscuit, and you've just got to go, well, hopefully he can earn his points before he's taken away and gives my enemy some victory points. Next up, it's the Fate Dealer. Now, sniper units can be really, really swingy depending on the battlefield and the terrain. They're always really consistent with their hitting, but they've got to have targets. So to help, boost this guy's potential to do what I need him to do, I've given him the Ocular Scanner equipment as well as the Pathfinder Cloak. So one, to help him take away cover from enemy operatives when he's trying to pick them off, and he does get those shots. The other is also to make him more survivable in the long run. I'm hoping initially to get this guy up on some vantage points just to protect the battlefield. But if that does fail, just being able to sit him back and keep him safe on an objective is a pretty big advantage too, allowing the rest of my team to move down. So although it's not the ideal play, it is a little bit of a waste of an operative if that's all he gets to do. It's not the end of the world. Next up, it's the Gunner. Deep down in my heart, I always really want to take the heavy gunner operatives because those weapons sound amazing. I just can't quite justify it in a team that I really want to keep mobile. So I'm going with the gunner also because, well, he's got a blaster, which is a plasma gun without the negative. So really, deep down, emotions aside, this is the smart choice. The Chalnath is the close combat punch of the team. Another operative I want to keep up close with my leader and be using him to pressure forward. He also might be able to take advantage of some of the ambush type tactical ploys that this team has. He can really, really do a lot of damage. Also that ability to parry opponents' hits against weaker guard units. That's pretty powerful. You might be able to get through some combat without even taking a hit. So I think he's going to come up big. The Kernite Hunter is the man with the poker bird. I'm excited to use this guy because I think that could be a pretty powerful ability. The way we can bring those operatives and make them targetable, we're going to really limit the options. And he's still a good warrior like all the Corsairs are. There's no real negative to this operative. I'm looking forward to using him. The Shade Runner is all about rule of cool. He's got some fantastic rules. It's an amazing model. I'm really looking forward to getting him amongst the guard units because I think he can do a lot of damage. Even that ability to whip past them and deal out some wounds on the way past could be pretty good against units that are mainly rocking 7 wounds. So that should be pretty cool. The Soul Weaver is the medic of the team, part medic, part commsman with the abilities that they pack. A very cool unit. I think a key in a team that's only got 8 wounds as well on each model. This definitely means that after combat, having a model like this that can heal them back up and get them back into the fight quickly, even if they get knocked out, hopefully you can heal them up, get them back into the fight. The Starstorm Duelist, well, he's got 2 pistols. It's not quite the Calamorph, but he's as close as I'll get in a Corsair team. This guy's pretty cool and powerful pistol as well, so packing a bit of extra heat in there could be a really good counter to the Ogryn as well, being able to deal a lot of damage without having to get in close combat, but still pushing that pressure up the board. Lastly, it's the Wayseeker, the Psyker of the team. Got some really, really cool powers. The ability to cast multiple powers in a turn is also really powerful. I haven't used any of them before, but I'm excited to get the opportunity to use as many of them as possible. My opponent today has gone for lots and lots of bodies, as the Blooded do. Kicks it off with a Traitor Chieftain with the Plasma Pistol and Improvised Blade. The Brimstone Grenadiers there. He's chucked some armor plates for a little bit of extra survivability on him. Traitor Butcher with a Sinister Trophy, making him even more hitty and killy in combat. There's the Commsman. And the Corpsens are going to be a big one on the team. He obviously buffs up someone before the game, but also throughout the game. This team can actually keep getting more powerful, which is a little bit concerning. Hopefully I can thin their numbers down enough that this doesn't come into play. There's the Flenser, another close combat guy. I'll be a Traitor Gunner with the Plasma Gun, always a threat that you need to take out early. A Traitor Sharpshooter, he's an interesting one as he is a sniper, but he's obviously not as accurate or as damaging as some of the other snipers in other teams. But thematically, he hasn't lost the ability to move and shoot and get up the board. So I actually like the way they built this model. I think it's a very thematic. He's still a sniper, but he's still going to be able to run forward like a madman. There's also the Traitor Thug, a Trench Sweeper. The big boy Ogryn is in there, and I'm really worried about this guy. That's a lot of wounds to take down, especially with a team that doesn't really have that much long range firepower to be able to whittle him down before he gets in. If my opponent uses him well, he could really get into the front of my units and tie it up while they're scoring points behind him. Lastly, I decided to forego the other character and take 2 traders with las guns instead. This is really just to help them pump up their numbers advantage. For Tac Ops, I decided to go with Seek and Destroy. My opponent's team is built all around charging forwards and mixing it up and throwing bodies at me very, very heavily. So I just want to lean into that and make sure I'm maximizing each of my return hits. First up was Execution. I had a feeling this was going to be a strong card to play, as the Blooded have low armor saves and they need to get up close for their game to work. So as long as they were losing more guys each turn, hey, it's a win for me. Second was Headhunter. Knowing their leader had a plasma pistol, he was going to have to push forward to use it, and well, hopefully I'd be ready. And lastly, I chose Soul Guard, which is a Corsair faction specific one. Each time an operative dies, they drop a Spirit Stone, and I score VP by retrieving them. Not necessarily the best one, but I always like to take at least one of the faction specific ones, just for a bit of theme and always, tie in it with how the team should play. I placed my barricades just in front of objectives 3 and 4 to provide cover for my operatives. Both of these objectives are pretty exposed and I didn't really want to lose anyone to a plasma shot in the first turn. It would hopefully give me a good launching point as well for later in the game to spring forward to the middle of the board. My opponent pretty much mirrored my actions, placing theirs in front of objectives 5 and 6. For my deployment, I was feeling a little bit cagey. Although the Blooded aren't renowned for their shooting, they still do have a team with a plasma gun and a very mobile sharpshooter, so I did have to keep that in mind. I do like this terrain setup. There's lots of vantage points, so winning that battle up high will be a huge boost for either team. With this in mind, I placed my Fate Dealer down first, with a plan to get him up on the vantage point in front of him as soon as possible. I put the Soul Weaver with him, just in case he did get into any trouble, it'd be able to power him back up. Next up, I placed my Shade Runner and Kernite Hunter down. These two are going to be my swing unit. Well, not like that, but they would start here and then move to counter different things as needed. On the other side of the battlefield, this is where I thought most of the action was going to happen. I placed my gunner behind the oil rig, ready to pounce up when a target presented itself. I then laid out the rest of my close combat heavy hitters with the Felarch, the Chalnath, and the Starstorm Duelist. It would be their job to push the center of the board and hold the line. Lastly, the Wayseeker was there as a backup with their psychic shenanigans. The Blooded had a lot of bodies to put down, and trying to keep them all out of sight wasn't easy. On one side, the dreaded Plasma, Butcher, Chieftain, and Brimstone Grenadier loaded up to storm down the flank. They were further backed up by the Thug and the Corpseman, who was ready to apply his performance-enhancing shots at a moment's notice. On the opposite flank, the Ogryn was the first to find his home. He was placed as far forward as he could be, ready to cause mischief up the field. With the Corsairs being short of those big heavy guns, I was really worried about how I was going to deal with that guy. The thing that makes it so tough is only being 8 wounds, each of his hits is massive, and also being that they're brutal, I can't parry them, which is usually a strength of the Corsairs in combat as well. On that side of the battlefield, he was backed up by the 2 regular troopers, the Commsman, Sharpshooter, Flencer, and the Trench Sweeper. In the scouting phase, both teams went with the free dash, knowing that position was going to be the priority. Unfortunately, this did mean for me, it gave the Blooded the initiative. They used their dash to push the Ogryn further towards my lines, while I used mine to get my Fate Dealer closer to the vantage point. To kick off the strategy phase, the Corpseman pumped up the Ogryn, giving him Relentless for the battle. I chose to use Plunderers to get my team up the board towards the objectives. I moved the Chalnath and the Gunner up behind the oil rig, ready to cause a ruckus later. The Blooded added their first blood token to their Plasma Gunner. And the last thing to do before we kicked off was to declare any tac ops, and there was only the one, which was the Corsairs revealing Soul Guard. For the first activation, the Blooded started the game by selecting the Ogryn and letting him amble forwards with a move and a dash. This avalanche of muscle was already a clear and present danger. But for me, I chose to ignore that danger for now. I decided to focus on getting points on the board and objectives locked down. To this end, I moved up the Chalnath to claim objective 4. There would be no mucking around in this game, and the Blooded were out for, well, blood. That's what they're out for. Their leader led the way by pushing up towards objective 6 and tucking into cover. Trying to draw out a few more moves from my opponent before I committed too heavily, I moved my Kernite Hunter up to the middle of the board to see where him and his Pokemon would be needed. For the Blooded, the Thug followed the leader to objective 6 and squirreled away into some cover. The Soul Weaver moved up with a bit of careful placement, snagging objective 3 while managing to remain hidden. The Blooded continued to lock down objectives, hefting his shield to give him a defensive boost. The Trench Sweeper planted his feet on objective 5. I then moved up my Shade Runner to the edge of the battlefield to use as a counter charge threat and to protect the Fate Dealer. For some reason, the Blooded continued to have a meeting near objective 6 as the Brimstone Grenadier also hustled over. I was now wanting to put a little bit more pressure on the center of the board with the intention of beating the Blooded to the middle, and then hoping really just to hunker down and survive the bodies that they threw at me. The leader was a key part of this. With his reasonably scary pistol and close combat prowess, I also wanted to make the most of his missed field, so I plonked him right on the objective. The Blooded now started to pressure the other side of the board, moving the Flencer to pressure my left flank. Now was a move that I was excited and worried about at the same time. I really wanted to claim that high ground, just like Obi-Wan, so I threw the Fate Dealer up onto the vantage point. He won't get to shoot this turn due to being heavy, but I can be patient. Now things start to get cagey the other way. The Blooded have significantly more models than me, and they can afford to slow play a few units here to bait me out. The Butcher started this by creeping up to the edge of some terrain, but not fully committing. Time for some psychic shenanigans, and I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty excited about this. The Wayseeker cast their mind into the warp and conjured up Warding Shield on the fella. They then moved to the center of the battlefield, ready to get involved again next turn. The Blooded, seeing me buffing units, now decided to buff theirs too. I'm seeing a theme here. The comms operative sent over an AP to the sharpshooter, then got on his bike and moved up the board. The duelist now moves up to the oil rig, biding his time until he gets to use his 6 shooters. Well, if you thought the team meeting on Objective 6 couldn't gain any new members, well, you'd be wrong, as the Plasma Gunner joins the party. Now that the Plasma had committed to moving, I was a bit more comfortable to move my blaster into a position on a vantage point to limit my opponent's movement and gain some control over those middle objectives. The Corpsman took his chance to jab someone else with the needle, pumping up the Plasma Gunner with the 6-up Feel No Pain. This now sent the Corsairs into Overwatch, but the terrain heavy board and interesting way we'd set it up really wasn't giving me many targets at the moment. So now the Blooded are going to get to do a few things in a row here. The GA2 Guardsmen both move up forwards, grab some cover and ready themselves to die gloriously. The exciting thing here though is it's the first shots of the game. Unfortunately, they're coming in against me. The sharpshooter sees his chance here to get into the game. He clambers up onto a vantage point, moves into position thanks to his extra APL, and lines up my Fate Dealer. Super annoyingly, he was somehow able to find a firing line that meant I had no cover as both sides of my base were exposed. So the camo cloak and the Pathfinder cloak are useless here. Despite this, I still wasn't that nervous as he was only hitting on 3s, 3 damage, and I had my healer nearby. Then he went and rolled 2 crits and 2 hits. I only managed to save 2, which meant that no matter what I did, 8 wounds was going to be going through because of the mortal wound 1 on both crits. I did obviously attempt to roll a save here with a CP, and as always, CP rerolls, well, they always fail. This was a really rough play as now I was the Anakin and he was the Obi-Wan in this situation. Then it was the real salt in the wound as my opponent revealed he'd kicked off Deadly Marksman and of course added a Blooded token to their pool. At the end of the turn, both teams scored the objectives closest to their deployment, meaning the scores were 2-all. That wasn't a terrible first turn, but losing the Fate Dealer at the end there, well, that really hurt, especially when I'd probably written off their sharpshooter a bit. It may have been a little bit of poor placement by me, but I also don't know where else I could have got him up and given him more cover. I knew that he was definitely going to take some shots at some point, but I just didn't expect them that it was actually going to kill him. Now it's me that has to worry about those vantage points as he's got the sharpshooter and potentially the plasma gun up there as well. We headed into the second turn and the roll-off saw the Blooded get the initiative again. They gained another Blooded token and then we had to remove 2 of the objectives from the battlefield, so objectives 6 and 3 disappeared. The Blooded gave one of their tokens to the Jerk Sharpshooter, but we must have miscounted here as he still had one to give, which we didn't do. It is hard to miscount 2, but we did it, so that's where we're at. Both teams also decided to hold on to their CP and no strategic ploys were played. The Blooded got things kicked off with another jerk move by the sharpshooter. He weaseled his way over to take a shot at my blaster. He did manage 3 hits, but much to my delight, I saved all 3. Where was that roll before? I really needed to stop that wall of muscle that was the Ogren from carving me up, so I powered up the Wayseeker and cast Freezing Grasp on it. Hopefully this would limit his options this turn. I then used the free dash to head over and cast Warding Shield on my Felarch again. The Blooded shenanigans continued here though, with the comms operative now activating and giving the Ogre +1 APL, basically completely negating my Freezing Grasp. These guys so far have had an answer for everything. Well, you've just got to move on, so next up my plan was to get rid of that sniper, and the first step of this plan was to move my Kernite Hunter up onto that vantage point with a move and a dash. He then chose to use his Felchu and launched him at the sharpshooter, hoping to put him into engage. But as I actually sat down and read the rules for how this works, I discovered that this is actually a little bit rubbish. Like, is it just me? I mean, if I have to achieve all those things to take this ability down from a 6-up to a 3-up, well, the operative is basically not in cover anyway, or I'd have other ways to deal with them. So, to no one's surprise here, I failed the roll. Bad Felchu, bad. The Corpsman continued his mad syringing and pumped up the Chieftain with the 6-up ignore wounds. Both teams were pretty hesitant to commit anything to the middle, and I decided I needed to break the deadlock, so I pushed my leader out to claim objective 1. I knew I was going to be out activated, so I just really wanted to make sure I could grab those prime positions and then make the enemy come to me on my terms. I then doubled down and used coordinated strike to move my hunter up under the cover and hidden away. My plan here was to use a CP on deadly ambush when my leader was inevitably charged, and then help even that playing field. The Blooded continued to be uncharacteristically cagey here and snuck the Trench Sweeper up to objective 1 behind the wall to contest it. The Soul Weaver had one job to do in this team, and I thought it was very thematic that I achieved my secondaries, well, at least one of them, with the Soul Weaver. I sent them up to grab the Soul Stone of the Fallen Fate Dealer, then a quick dash to stay out of trouble. This, in hindsight, was a little bit of an error, as I'd forgotten about the Brimstone Grenadier and his ability to hit my hidden guys. He trudged up the battlefield out of the team meeting and hurled a crack grenade, killing the Shade Runner before he'd even had a chance to do anything cool. Losing him for nothing really opened up that flank. Trying not to get too caught up in revenge and bloodlust, I switched my mind back to the other side of the battlefield and reminded myself to secure my objectives. I moved the Duelist up to claim objective 4 and to be ready as a backup for my Felarch and Hunter in the middle. The Thug, being the tough guy he is, ambled his way onto objective 2. I was in a difficult spot if I really wanted to get that one back. The Blooded had a large number of heavy hitters in that area, and I really couldn't afford to get into a model for model trade in close combat, as I'd already lost 2 models, and with that already lower model count, this was going to be tough as the game moved on. The Blooded were doing a really good job of using the terrain to give me no targets, and we're going to be able to take a run on objective 1 towards the end of the turn, just through sheer weight of numbers. To try and counter this, I moved my blaster across to the oil rig to set up for Overwatch over objectives 1 and 4. Seeing that I'd run out of things to do, the Blooded just shuffled their leader up to get into a dangerous spot for next turn. I was now locked into Overwatch, and currently there was no real targets presenting themselves, so it just went back to the Blooded. It was time for more tricks from the Blooded, and showing the strategic acumen they once held as Imperial Guardsmen, the first of the GA2 Lasgunners moved up in sneaky mode to help outnumber me on objective 1 by hiding behind the wall. The second Lasgunner, though, moves out of cover to take a cheeky shot at my blaster. Not a bad move, as it's a great way to draw out my blaster's Overwatch and only risk losing a basic guy that you don't really care about. Lucky for me though, he did whiff these shots. This did put me in a tough spot, as I knew there were going to be some juicy targets coming up soon, but that if I didn't take this opportunity to shoot Overwatch now, my blaster may not get that opportunity again and just get shot off the vantage point for nothing. So I went for blood and lined up the Lasgunner in an absolutely disgusting whiff of a roll, which I had to spend a CP to turn it into something usable. I was able to take the Lasgunner down. Lucky that was not a plasma gun is all I can really say about that roll. As he was also within 6 inches of my operatives when he died, he also gave them a blooded token on his death. This is really turning into a no-win situation for me. As I did suspect though, the gunner was now in trouble. The plasma jumped up onto the vantage point and opened fire. He does roll a 1 here, so that would have been a little bit of a, help for me to feel good about something, but he spends a CP, gets the reroll, takes no damage, and I've got one very dead gunner. The blooded activations continued, and the moment I'd been dreading was here. The Ogryn charged headlong into my Felarch. And it was at this moment that I realized I had actually misplaced my Hunter. As I mentioned earlier, I'd placed him here to be able to ambush any charges that came through. The Ogryn, though, was actually able to charge and engage both of these operatives. The Ogryn only hit 3 times and I hit 4, but with how hard the Ogryn hits, it actually doesn't matter, and the Felarch is absolutely crushed. My opponent then also rubs more salt, maybe some vinegar, maybe some broken glass into my wounds by revealing Headhunter for 2 victory points. While I wiped the tears from my eyes, the last move of the turn was just the Butcher moving up to help secure objective 2 and be in a dangerous position for next turn. At the end of the turn, the score sits at the Blooded on 7 and the Corsairs on 3. Wow, that turning point definitely could have gone better. I'm already down to 5 operatives with an Ogre in my lines, a plasma and a sharpshooter on vantage points, and both middle objectives in my opponent's control. This game has definitely not gone the way I thought it would. The Blooded have done a great job of drawing out my moves and limiting the damage I can do. I feel like I'm having to be very reactive as opposed to dictating the pace of the game. Feels like I'm playing against myself with the way I use the Wormblade and what I do to my opponents. So maybe this is a little bit of karma here though. It's very frustrating. In this turn, to get back in the game, I'll need to do my best to clear at least one of those middle objectives, and of course try my best not to get tabled. Well, I was lucky enough this turn to get the initiative, which is a bonus. My opponent then added another Blooded token to their pool, and they were now distributing those to the Butcher, the Plasma Gunner, Sharpshooter, and the leader received the final one and was now under the gaze of the gods. The strategy phase again was another really quiet one, with both teams wanting to hold onto their CP. I just couldn't really find any of the strategic ploys worth it at the moment. I wasn't really desperate for any of the things that they could do. There's pros and cons to having the initiative. It does mean that you are the one that has to decide what happens first. That makes sense, it's called the initiative, but it does mean that sometimes you have to make really hard choices and choose a unit or a situation where you may lose something and you don't know if it was the right choice until later on. I selected the Chalnath here because, well, he was in trouble if I didn't get him the opportunity to hit first, and it was also a great chance to finally finish off this Ogren. He did just that, but he did take 5 damage in the process. I then spent 1 CP here that I had been saving on light fingers, so my hunter could pick up the Spirit Stone of the dead leader, and then I used a move and a dash to hightail it out of dodge. My real intention here was to get him back towards my healer so I could get him back in the fight again. But as I sort of touched on, it highlighted another potential misplay here, or something I missed in having the initiative. Sometimes when your opponent goes first, at least they make the choice for you. They kind of dictate which way the game's going to go, or make a choice you can't stop. In this case, I had to watch as I realized the mistake I'd made. So instead of going the close combat that I did with the Chalnath and the Ogren, maybe I should have looked at potentially moving my duelist up and getting his guns into combat. But instead what's happened here though now is the Flencer took this opportunity to charge up the boards and promptly flenced my poor duelist before he even got to use his cool pistols. He also only took 3 damage in return. Another operative down. The wheels are falling off a bit, but I've always got plans within plans in every game I play, as much as my opponent loves to hear me say that over and over again. But it's true, you always have to have backups, and having a team that's got psychic powers for once means you get some interesting and cool, unique ideas. So I'd come up with a bit of an interesting one of a way to use my Wayseeker to keep me in the game. First up, I cast Lightning Strike on the Thug to hopefully clear him off that objective. But another classically bad roll here sees only 2 hits. I spend a CP to re-roll, and of course, still a miss. That's been happening a bit, as you can tell. Luckily, the Thug failed both his saves, but he does limit damage by 1 on normal hits, so frustratingly, he stays alive on 2 wounds. That was part 1 of the plan not going quite the way I wanted. I think we did maybe make a mistake on the dice we put down next to him there. I think we had him on 1, but it's okay, it doesn't affect the game. I then use my free dash to head over to the Soul Weaver and use Warpfold to swap spots with the Soul Weaver to make the healing the hunter actually possible in this lifetime. It may be selling the Wayseeker down the river a little bit, but I really need to get Objective 1 back, and I think the only way to realistically do that is to have my Chalnath back to full health. And after failing to kill the Thug off Objective 2, I really might have to write that off. And after thinking that I was so smart, well, as we say, the best laid plans never survive contact with the enemy. I was hoping to use a little bit of sneakiness here, and that having the Wayseeker out in the open would actually make my opponent, get targets in his eyes and want to go for him. But he's seen through my ruse, and after some careful measuring, unfortunately, the Butcher was actually able to charge the Soul Weaver. The combat wasn't as one-sided as I thought it was going to be, with the Soul Weaver dropping 2 crits before being taken out, but it still gave the Blooded a new token, and then the Butcher healed up a wound. With my plans now in tatters, I still need to try and score more points. I didn't have the models left to pick up all the spirit stones littering the battlefield. There was now pretty much more dead operatives than alive ones. The enemy leader continued to hide, like a coward I might add, and execution had turned into an embarrassing idea as I was losing a lot of units. So the primary it was, and failing that, at least taking some of them with us. I chose my hunter and launched him and his poker bird into the trench sweeper. They take him down, only taking 3 damage in the bargain, and I'm now contesting objective 1. The blooded leader, obviously hearing me call him a coward, took his chance though to storm forward and plasmid my hunter right in the face, cooking him and his bird friend. The Corsairs head into Overwatch here, but there's no targets presenting themselves. So now we have to sit back as the endless tide of the blooded continues to not only stay in the fight, but get more powerful as the corpseman runs up and heals the thug back up 4 wounds. The thug though, for only being freshly healed, decides to bide his time and stays on the objective. The comms operative now moves up to help lock down objective 1. And now it's the sharpshooter's turn to continue making it a bad day for me. He still wants to make an impact and he lines up the Chalnath, retaining an auto hit for the blooded token. Then he also spends a CP to maximize the hits due to the fact he dropped 1. And finally, the valiant warrior has been silenced. This also gained him 1 VP for the first kill on Deadly Marksman. Although it feels like it's been going an eternity for me, the turn is still not quite over. The plasma operative just moves forward up the board. Then the Grenadier, living up to his name, decides to throw said namesake at the Wayseeker, taking off 6 wounds. For the final activation, the final operative just passes. The score at the end of the turn is the blooded on 12 and the Corsairs still on 3. It doesn't look that terrible on paper, but it's not going well. Wow, that was a real hard turn to sit through. I won't go into too much of a breakdown of that turn now, as I've really only got 1 operative left, and he's got 2 wounds. So let's just get this over with. In the strategy phase, the horrendous run continues as the blooded get the initiative. The sharpshooter, really feeling himself today, he activates and decides just to pop the head off my Wayseeker. This gets the blooded a 2nd VP for Deadly Marksman, and basically brings up the end of the game, as the blooded net can now just run around and do what they need to do. The final score is the blooded 19, and the Corsairs on a very distant 3 points. Let's head back to me in the studio for the breakdown. Well, that did not go according to plan. I had a lot of plans and none of them saw it go quite that way. If I have to break down a few key moments of what went wrong in that battle report for me, I'm sure those in the comments have already listed a lot of them. There was a lot of bad moments. But the main couple that I noticed upon retrospect, getting to watch it back, definitely not using the Corsairs' speed to my advantage. That's their biggest strength, is they're super fast, and realistically, by the end of Turning Point 1 or the start of Turning Point 2, I really should have had those central objectives already locked down with a lot of bodies on it. There was, especially on Objective 1, there was a lot of terrain there that I could have had guys up scoring points and being relatively well concealed, and then forcing the blooded to head up to me and have to tangle on my terms. Holding back like I did and playing a little bit too safe, probably because of the fear of things like the plasma gun and the sharpshooter, who did turn out to be the bane of my life anyway, but probably more so because I did hang back. I allowed him to sort of get into the game and use that long-range silent shooting firepower to their advantage. So definitely a thing I won't be doing with the Corsairs ever again will be holding back. I'll definitely be using that free dash and that ability to get up the board as quick as possible to maximum effect. The other one I kind of noticed there as well was actually getting the power that I used for my my Wayseeker, getting that incorrect, thinking that actually just basically took 1 APL off the Ogryn, whereas it actually just reduces their movement and takes away the ability to dash. That's actually huge. That would have stopped that Ogryn from being the unit charging me, and would have either meant that they couldn't do it till next turn and I could have held those objectives and scored those for that round, or it would have even allowed me to countercharge or get my Corsairs amongst some of those weaker guard units as well, cleaning them off the objective before having to deal with the ogre. And I've done a fantastic job of stranding him there. And unfortunately, I didn't take advantage of it because I read the rules wrong. So, happens to the best of us. I'm a kill team casual after all, but no real excuse. That should definitely not have been something that happened there. There was a little bit of bad luck with some dice rolls here and there, but it is a dice game after all, so you really can't blame that. Also, too, for kind of thinking just because a team should play one way, that your opponent will play them that way, was my other big, drawback in this game. The thing that I miscalculated. I was expecting the Blooded to come at me in a screaming horde, and I was just going to be picking them off left, right, and center. But my opponent did a fantastic job of using the extra numbers of our activations to play quite a patient game and bring their units up slowly, and using the ogre as the battering ram to get into my lines. So, tip of the cap to my opponent, I think they played that really well. I don't think there was much of a better way that they could have played it. And to be honest, I probably couldn't have played it much worse. Another mistake was possibly at the start of Turning Point 3. I had the initiative and I may have chosen wrong activating my Chalnath as opposed to either saving the Starstorm Duelist. I also could have looked at saving the Soul Weaver as well. I could have been pulling them back from the other side of the battlefield instead of having to do those switcheroo shenanigans with the Wayseeker, which was kind of sacrificing that model to save another model. It was kind of like trying to plug a leaky ship terribly. That's basically what I was doing. I was plugging one hole and making lots of other ones in the process. Another interesting thing though was both teams had a lot of CP left over for a lot of the game. Most games I find that teams are pretty CP hungry, but for me I didn't find that much utility in a lot of the Corsairs strategic and tactical ploys. Maybe that was just because first time playing them I wasn't using them to the best of their ability, but just another interesting little tidbit there I noticed as well. So that's it for the battle report today, guys. Make sure you leave your comments below. I'm sure some of them will be positive, some of them will be negative, but I'm always interested to hear what you guys would have done differently, how you guys play both these teams, what you thought of the battle report. Make sure you head down there and join in the fun. Make sure you're subscribed and liking these videos as well. Obviously, this one took a little while to come out, but you can tell new digs, new house, so that's why it's been a little bit of in between drinks here. There'll be more battle reports coming out very soon, and make sure as well that you're tuning in to Kill Team Casuals, coming out weekly now, which is insane. So Kill Team channels, now we have our own channel for it. Casual Wargamers, so make sure you head over, check that out on YouTube as well. There is a Patreon, so make sure you sign up to that. It's a great way to support myself and the guys so we can keep creating this great content for you guys. Spend your Britquid there. If you listen to the show, that'll make more sense to you. But yeah, I'm so glad to have you guys here. More battle reports again very soon. In the meantime, enjoy your day.